Welcome to Data Matters, where we discuss all things data. Today we're joined by Murtaza from Amplifi Capital, an organization dedicated to making financial services more accessible. And today we're discussing Gen.AI, data, and in a highly regulated space, technology, teams. Let's dive into it. Welcome to Data Matters Live, where we discuss all things data. Today we'll be discussing Gen.AI and data in financial services. And we're joined by Murtaza, CTO of Amplifi Capital, whose main focus is accessibility to financial services. And Murtaza, you've been there and done that. You've been developing AI long before it was even fashionable and trendy. So I'm very excited to dive in and get your experience and particularly in financial services. So thanks for coming on the show.
No, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for inviting me to the show.
Awesome.
And yes, I've been involved in data for a very long time.
Yeah, I mean that's probably a great place to start. To kind of get the background and how did you find yourself in these kind of AI projects within financial services?
Sure. In fact, of course, I'm an engineer by heart, but I've been into data probably more than 2 decades, where I've been involved in lots of data projects. And then, as you're involved in data projects, it's de facto you'll probably somewhere down the line you'll touch on AI. And financial services, I got involved in financial services since 2014. I've been in financial services, so probably a decade now, in variety of organizations, payments, trading, including blockchain, FX, invoice financing, insurance, and banking. I got involved in Gen.AI in 2021. So I've been involved with traditional AI, and then Gen.AI I started touching in 2021. In 2021, when we started touching on Gen.AI, we were exploring the early models of GPT-3, BERT, and trying to really explore as to what we could do with these LLMs. Organizations, of course, they were not aware of what the capabilities these models offer at the time. So luckily, I was part of the innovation team where we had enough room to explore and research on what we can use. And we started building initial applications where they were mainly driven for content generation. And we tried to give these applications to users within finance, legal, marketing, where they generate a lot of content. But
That's
also what we
interesting.
did.
So they actually started with content generation. So what give us an idea? What sort of content did they have in mind?
To be very frank, when we started in 21, we just had to come up with concepts. So we had things like generating an email, generating some blog posts, helping review, summarizing documents,
So
contracts.
it's a productivity mainly, like actually trying to get one person to do the work of 10 kind of idea.
That's correct. Yes, yeah. And also we wanted to get employees to experience this tech, because the more they experience the tech, the more feedback we can get in terms of where we can help with these tools.
Yeah. How did you go about gathering that feedback? Like, it's obviously they can use the application, you could sit beside them, look over their shoulder, but probably you might not get when you're sitting there, they're sort of real what's going on. So how did you get their feedback?
We actually, the way we got feedback was personal discussions. So we didn't create like send us an email. We literally sat with them and experienced their day-to-day work, and explored exactly where you're utilizing these tools. Also, that gave us an opportunity to understand their day-to-day work or what they actually do on a day-to-day basis. But that's the best way of collecting feedback. Then as it got matured, we started creating areas where they could give us the feedback. They could also give us like rating on the responses, thumbs up, thumbs down, so we know whether it worked or not.
Yeah. Because I think that's probably something everyone's a lot more familiar with now, that sometimes the output's astounding and you're exactly what you want. Other times it's kind of miles off, and you can tell it's miles off. And the problematic ones are where it sounds about right, but actually it's completely wrong. What were those early days like with the users? I mean, were they? I imagine they might have been blown away, because it wasn't common knowledge.
Yes, some of them were blown away. They couldn't, actually believe the responses because they were very human-like, right? But
Yeah.
also, you're spot on, right? Because in the early days, we didn't know how to control the hallucination, and the LLMs actually hallucinate significantly. And
Hmm.
the responses are so promising that some users were blown off, but some users were like, "That's not correct," you know.
Yeah.
So those were good early feedbacks we got. Um,
Yeah. That, like you said, you touched on hallucinations there. The whole technology is trying to find the best fit, the best sounding thing, almost like an exceptional liar. It's really designed to sound convincing. Like, what would sound exactly right here, even, without any regard for the actual facts. It's just what would fit exactly right here, which is obviously really challenging for financial services and a domain where making stuff up is just not on. That's tricky.
no, absolutely, yeah, yeah. You cannot make things up. Um, where so, one of the areas we were helping the team was, we had loads of agents, right? Insurance agents. So
Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
thinking of uh, generating product literature, and you couldn't hallucinate there because if you created the wrong product literature, that could have a big impact. So yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
very
that's right.
important.
So, Mehaz, you mentioned some of the use cases generating content, and then you mentioned the way that if you're offering advice, did these services find their ways directly to the customer, or was it always via a person inside the bank as more of a, a tool, but they still had the final say? What did it look like? The ones that you've deployed.
Initially, they were internal use cases where we created multiple AI assistant or AI bots with vertical knowledge stores, and then some ability to generate some content if they wish to. Uh, but then it did go to the customer. So initial use cases were indirect to the customer. So the
Hmm.
internal employees were engaging with these bots and then having a human touch with the customer. And then we started looking at exposing these interactions directly with the customer. That took a while because we wanted to make sure um, it's has the right guardrails, it's
Hmm.
matured enough, the conversations are right. There's lots and lots of testing you need because every time a response would be different potentially. We also had to look at, how do we actually store the conversation history, because the conversation could get quite longer, right? And
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and those conversation history then could cost you a lot of money just to have one conversation due to the token limits. So those did happen, but we had to go through a mature cycle to understand this use case will work. It doesn't hallucinate. It has the right guardrails
Hmm.
before we actually went into production, and we did go into production through for some of the social media channels like WhatsApp, Facebook, and Instagram.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I also found that testing and the guardrails a challenging aspect, because it's actually quite counterintuitive to any kind of normal testing. You very much expect an input to generate an output, and to test that. Whereas, with Gen AI, you can have an input and an output, and then you test again, same input, different output. And that's just, a concept that's quite hard initially to like get your head around. Well, how to deal with it, but also why that might be the case. And you know, same with the guardrails. You kind of don't really know initially how to test it and how to go about making sure that it's doing the right thing. And what did you do in that regard? Did you do it all internally through your own research teams? Did you bring in externals? Like, these were the early days where no one really knew. So how did you overcome those challenges?
It was mainly through internal research teams.
Mm.
We did engage, one external research organization, but most of the engineering, actually, pretty much 100% of the engineering, we
Mm.
looked at internal. And you're absolutely right. It's fairly new, right? And whoever came in to guide us in terms of Gen AI or how we should do Gen AI. We found that we had the same knowledge, or in some scenarios, a bit more.
Yeah. So it's fascinating to see how Gen AI is growing and the hype around it. And one of the things I kind of often wonder, have we reached the peak already? Are we starting to see all the use cases we will see? What's your opinion? Are there more things it can do in financial services or in the wider world that we haven't even dreamt of yet?
I wouldn't say we've reached the peak as of yet. We've definitely got a lot more matured in terms
Mm,
of understanding these tools and these models. Um, there is a lot, I think we've just gone with we had the hype cycle, and we reached a stage where it was quite overwhelming with these tools. Now
mm,
we've reached a slight level of maturity where we can understand the models, we can understand the technology better. We have lots of tools available in the market. We can create proof of concepts a lot faster in matter of
yeah.
days or weeks to test that this use case is valid or not. So what I see now is the maturity of the use cases will be a lot better.
Mm,
Businesses will be able to identify where they need to apply Gen AI, and in which processes. And you will probably see a shift from um, original content generation or conversation to being solving more business problems,
yeah.
underwriting, for example, legal and compliance,
Yeah.
operations processes, and so on and so forth. So
There's kind of two areas for me that seem to be the indicators that we're reaching a different level of maturity. The first is kind of, I saw GitHub in their Copilot is now
Mhm.
allowing users to choose the language model. So you have some control over which particular model you want to get advice from. And I think that in this use case we're discussing could be thought of in terms of tone. Like if it's a legal use case, there's probably a legal tone that you want to adopt or want the generated content to adopt. Um, the other is actually the knowledge itself. So we, can imagine in financial services want to use a high quality knowledge base, trusted information, zero hallucinations. There's a very much a knowledge component that seems to be getting more mature, and the two together, I think you'll probably end up with that's where we will get more growth, and then, like you said, it becomes available to different use cases that we know to be challenging today that probably you can't use the straight open AI API generated response. You need to augment it with both that tone and the knowledge base. I wonder then, where's Amplify Capital putting its effort? Where are you sort of starting on this, leveraging the benefits?
So with Amplify Capital, we originally, when I joined, the first thing I did was to identify, which areas we can bring efficiency, because it's always about moving the needle, right?
Mm, mm,
And where we can get the fastest return of investment. And then we started identifying the use cases. So we listed out areas where we need efficiency, and then the use cases, which we ended up with 13 use cases. But then what we did after that was we validated each of those use cases. And the way we validated each of those use cases by just putting an IRR in there and looking at what is the percentage benefit
mm.
we are going to get in terms of productivity, cost benefits, so on and so forth. So there's an algorithm which we apply, and it was quite fascinating because the use cases which we believed would be game changers and would be fascinating were got the lowest score. And one of the example I can give you is voice bot. Because when we started looking at these use cases, we said we should have a voice bot, a human-like voice bot, which could, and we rate it quite high because that's a great way to engage a customer. But when we looked at the actual return, it dropped in terms of the
Yeah,
return, because most of our customers, they either send us an email or they would prefer to chat because these are lending customers, right?
Mm.
Rather than a phone. Means, of course, depending on a different financial product, it could be different. In an insurance world, it could be slightly different, where they do have these interactions. And then once we did that, we just didn't. I think to answer your second part of the question is like, LLMs. Which LLM was the right LLM? We didn't jump on saying, okay, we're going to use OpenAI 3.5 or 4 or 4.0 or Haiku. We validated what would be the best LLM for that particular use case. And then
Yeah.
last but not the least is how are we going to engage with these LLMs, which is where your data security, privacy, all of those things come in, right? We need
Mm.
to make sure we are regulated, as well all the information which we are, because this information is going to cut through multiple networks, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
and that's
That
where
the
we decided to build our own platform.
okay.
So
Yeah.
we've started the journey on building the platform. We're calling it AI Matrix. Um,
Calling it.
AI Matrix.
Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's an interesting name within the organization. But the platform, the fundamental thing about the platform is it is a central place for all Gen.AI use cases.
Mm.
And it will harness the knowledge from our data platform, which is also, we've just gone live with our data platform. And that data platform is going to constantly send us the information. We'll curate it and we'll start building these knowledge stores. What
Mm.
we're
Mm.
looking at is automating the build of the knowledge stores, if we can automate that. And then, of course, prompting. So we have a prompt engine, we have a LLM service.
Yeah.
The LLM service, we have business logic around it, which can identify which LLM to use at what point in time, where the channel is, where's
Yeah.
the request coming from, and it's all building blocks, pretty much. It's all building
Yeah.
blocks,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
will bring it together.
And that makes. I think a lot of organizations are at that same point where they kind of know that there's a huge benefit to be had. They kind of know some of the use cases, but I think are predicting that there'll be so many more that it's worth investing in a more strategic platform approach, because you don't know what the demand might be, but you expect it to be a lot more than it is today. And the kind of, for me, the LLM choice. I went to a talk where one of the people who were assessing them and publishing their kind of results went from sort of tens of LLMs that they could talk about and understand to hundreds of thousands where there was actually no point anymore. They couldn't. There's no point in sort of trying to describe them in in this kind of fashion where you get someone's opinion about them. You really have to look at them a lot more statistically. And so they stopped publishing their blog about LLMs, specific LLMs,
Yeah,
and becomes much more nuanced where the benefits come from. And kind of like your name, the matrix of those, plugging those different things together. Well, there will be a lot of combinations, I think, and specialized use cases. Maybe many the organizations running many LLMs, many data sources. Yeah, this is interesting.
yeah, no, absolutely. And again, this is coming from experience, right? Because it's very easy to go to the best LLM and generate your content or responses, or do your analysis on whatever use cases you have.
Mm. Mm.
But you'll be surprised, like some of the smaller LLMs are actually more smarter if you
Mm.
use it in the proper way. And also you have, just as we are talking of LLMs, you have vertical LLMs now, right? So you have LLMs for banking, like you had one from Bloomberg
Mm.
GPT.
Mm.
And again, it's a very small model, but it's pretty precise in terms of finance.
Yeah.
And some of the responses you get is actually more accurate than some larger models out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be the advice I would give anyone who's trying to explore um, uh, any Gen AI use cases. Try to pick the LLM which is right for that use case and has domain knowledge. If it has domain knowledge, it makes it easier for you, because then if you augment with your own knowledge stores,
Mm. Mm.
the generation of the responses are more accurate.
Yeah, and of course, there's no requirement for a company to release their LLM. Like, I'd say one of the possibilities is that you use your own history of trading, your own history of responses to produce a very good LLM that sounds like and generates responses like the company. And that could use all the email history, for example. I think there's a point probably worth touching on is the kind of what they call slop. If we're all generating a lot of content through AI, you don't want that content coming back into your LLM and essentially degrading the output. So I think that's probably another challenge that companies or organizations will have to overcome. They'll have to deal with what is AI and what is not AI and what is part of that what they use as their training base. And that will become more and more difficult to even determine what was AI generated and what wasn't. I see that as a big old challenge. I don't know if you're thinking about that stuff already or trying to deal with that in your platform.
We try to, again, it's very hard, as you said, right? But we try to deal with that through our knowledge stores and guardrails, which I mentioned earlier.
Mm,
Identifying whether it's AI generated or not, I think for us within this domain, it's probably less important. More, I think, is in the academic space.
right.
If you
Yeah.
look in the academic space, it's very, very important whether it's AI generated or not. In our side, I think more important is that if we can get the accuracy of what we are generating, what is the use case,
Yeah.
and does it adhere to the regulations and
Mm,
compliance? Very, very important, because we're dealing with we are in finance, right? So it's all
yeah. Yeah.
about
Yeah.
money. So we need to make sure, and also we're dealing with customers, and we need to make sure that yes, yeah, we to answer your question, yes, we are looking at it,
Mm,
but in terms of higher levels, it's more important we get the data
yeah. Yeah.
security
Yeah.
compliance right. Yeah.
And perhaps a wider topic for another day. But I actually wonder how regulators and more industry governing bodies, how well they're keeping up. That seems like a massive challenge for someone who's probably typically quite slow and they're watching and coming along afterwards. I imagine that they are looking at AI and financial services organizations being more AI facing services, that regulation will have a job to keep up. I don't know what your experience is so far. Are they ahead? Are they behind? Are they pushing you in a certain direction? What is the regulator approach at the minute?
I would say the regulators have started taking this seriously now.
Mm,
You They are accommodating AI, that this is AI generated, and this is the areas where we're using AI. And we have the EU Act, right, which is coming in place. So the EU Act or EU AI Act, I don't know exactly what they call it,
yeah.
but it's coming in force April 25, right?
Yeah.
And the way they have done it is they've identified as number of risk categories as to which risk category your use case fits into, and based on that risk category, you have to provide certain details of how you're using data, and how you're using AI, and
Mm,
what are
mm,
the non-human elements to that
yeah.
particular use case. And I think the higher risk areas are more in the human talent management space. So if you're
Yeah.
doing anything in in that space, then yeah, you will fall in the high risk category. So yes, yeah, I can see that they're getting more serious, and it's going to get even more serious once we step into the new year, once the
Yeah.
EU Act comes
I mean
in.
that's just driving everyone, isn't it? That is really quite impressive. The amount of effort and the pace at which all these things are moving is just
Yeah.
it's quite incredible. So these data and Gen AI projects, they can be massive undertakings. You can by the sounds of the type of investment you're making. I wonder then how you organize yourselves. How do you create the teams that can be successful? What's your approach?
So yeah, very, very important. The team, what I believe is you need a squad which is has all the skills needed to execute that use case.
Hmm. Hmm.
Which of course is a variety. It's a range of skills you need, starting from data science, data engineers. You need actual core engineers as well, because it's very heavy engineering. Because you
Yeah.
have the models ready. You need to make sure you have the right infrastructure people as well within sort of like DevSecOps team, business members involved in building that use cases. So you have the knowledge of the process as you go along, because um, because the technology is so powerful, if you don't have the right business member as part of the squad, it's very easy to sway away and start building something
Mm.
which might turn out to be something which is not usable. So very important. And last but not least is the buy-in, business buy-in. So you need to make sure that
Yeah.
you have the business buy-in and the right funding in place. Of course, the fundings are now slightly different to what when I started the journey. The fundings, we had a very heavy infrastructure funding needed as well at the time.
Interesting.
But now, of course, the infrastructure funding doesn't need to be that heavy because you have these models available through AWS or Azure, and you don't have to jump on a large model to start with, where spending a lot of money during the development and testing
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah. I can see that.
Uh, but you definitely need funding in terms of the right skills and talent.
Yeah.
And one of the other things which you need to make sure as well, which I've learned, is it's not a traditional IT deliverable. It's a mix of technology and AI. So it is both coming together and also driven by business, because the
Mm.
business is looking for bringing that change within the organization. Therefore, whoever is going to lead that delivery of that project, I believe, should be a senior member within the organization and should be technically savvy as to how the underlying technology works, because
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
constantly changing landscape. It changes every week.
Yeah.
So if you're not up to it, you might go with the traditional approach and realize 3 months, 6 months down the line, what you delivered is already outdated.
Yeah, definitely. So there's quite a few interesting things you've touched on there. It strikes me that the delivery model, you mentioned, it's not kind of typical technology project. So it sounds like it's more, and you can imagine how it's more aligned as a service delivery, because artificial intelligence is delivering something artificially. So you actually kind of, it sounds to me like you've hit the nail on the head. Is a business person involved is there to deliver the service. It's there to deliver what the outcome is. And that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it. And I can certainly see that the infrastructure demands previously, sort of 5 years ago when we were starting to invest in this space and look at building things, it was all about model management and how you actually go about, managing these things. Whereas, like you said, suddenly they're available fairly cheaply. That just changed the game entirely. And you mentioned it's changing weekly. I wonder what's how do you deal with that? That what are you seeing that what do you do? I mean, because you could end up so distracted that you don't actually end up delivering anything. So how do you sort out the noise and end up with a good focus?
Yeah, and that goes back to the original, why we started with the AI matrix, because AI matrix is like blocks. It's like Lego.
Mm, mm,
So um, as the landscape changes, as the models change, if you have a new model come in without changing a lot of your infrastructure and your backend services, you can bring that model into as a Lego and start
yeah.
using that model.
So just make your
Like
technology more flexible. Just make it possible to plug in and take pieces out. That seems quite clever.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, you actually got the thing right. It's more of a service we are delivering
Mm.
rather than a project that this is finished, because it's not going to finish.
Yeah.
It's a constant ongoing life cycle. So because you're delivering this service, and to be ahead of the curve and making sure that that service is delivering value at all times, you need to
Mm.
make sure you have a very flexible platform so that you can deliver that service to your end user, whether it's an internal or external.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. The other thing you touched on there was the kind of the squad idea. So it's
Yeah.
not a totally brand new idea, but I don't think it's that commonplace in financial services. And it strikes me that to build a squad, particularly in a domain like this where it's quite hard to find talent that knows all the different parts, Now that's going to bring its own challenges. So, how are you going about building up the squads and finding the right people and actually creating the right teams? That'd be interesting to dive into.
Yeah, so luckily now we have that in place. So we
Mm,
are in execution mode. Initially, yes, it was more of education. I think it was not about getting the business. When I went through the concept, Amplify got it straight away. So that was less of a challenge for us,
mm,
but more of how do we execute this now. The model we use is squads and chapters,
right.
which is more of a Spotify model. Organizations like Wise and other organizations, they use different models. I think Wise uses a component and events methodology model, which
Mm,
is
mm,
again it's a good model. But with our model, we have squads and chapters. Again, squads are autonomous, so as I mentioned, we bring in all the skills needed for that squad, and then they're autonomous, so they can run by themselves. The advantage they have is they can prioritize deliverables themselves
mm.
uh, based on the business priorities. So if a business has that specific priority, they don't need to go through multiple priority life cycles. They can make a decision, say, okay, we're going to change, and we're going to make this as a priority and deliver
Yeah.
that service. Also, the services can be lightweight and can be delivered a lot faster for the business to start consuming and testing it. uh, and also what we're doing is we have these chapters. Chapters are more horizontal specialists
Yeah.
working in that specific area. And as we deliver these services, they are consumable services, they are APIs, or they are the services which is a business. They are available not only to other squads but to chapters as well.
Oh, I see. That's interesting. So,
Yeah,
that may not obvious to everyone, but as a company, you're in high growth mode,
yeah,
and this kind of way of organizing with autonomy, with shared assets, that's kind of because you're in high growth mode. That won't work for everyone, of course, but the pace that you're trying to deliver at, that makes tons of sense to be organized in that way, where you don't have overwhelming governance to get anything done, but do have enough governance to make sure that it's on the right track and aligned with the business. Yeah, that's quite good.
yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, we have that you know opportunity to bring these structures and move faster.
Hmm.
However, for larger organization as well, I would say it is possible because in my previous organization, we did run not 100%, but a similar concept of squads, but we didn't have chapters. So it is possible for larger organization as well. And other thing which I would suggest is for larger organization, there's a concept of tribes. So
Yeah.
tribes is multiple squads into that
Yeah.
tribe. So if you have fairly large organization, then you can build multiple squads with multiple speciality. Again, they should be having um, their own goals
Hmm.
as to what their goals are for that squad. So they can build that squad with that skills needed from cross-functional teams, and then they deliver. And then you can define a tribe where you can have multiple of those squads as part of that tribe. So then they have all those goals coming to a collective goal, which
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
a strategic goal they want to deliver. So you could execute that in a different way for a larger organization.
Yeah, I mean it's funny, isn't it? Like, we've both been in IT a long time, and it always comes back to how you organize yourselves to get work done. Technology is challenging. Technology is changing rapidly in this area, but a lot of it is about how you get stuff done, how you organize people, how you, you actually make this available in the end. Yeah, good to see that some things don't change.
Yes, yes, yeah, yeah. Means the underlying methodology still stays, the same. You still follow the same agile practices, whether you do, Scrum or Kanban.
Mm,
The actual delivery, it's the management of it. So, if you step back, a few decades back, we had project management practices like the PMI. They had different kind of models as well, right? These are more modern methodologies and modern execution models. um, they more for the senior management to make sure they get the goals delivered and
mm, mm.
managed properly. But when it comes to the actual delivery, we still follow the same agile principles.
Yeah, indeed. Now, predictions time, I suppose. We've covered the kind of opportunity and the pace of change and the team structures. I suppose then that just leaves the future. What does the future look like in financial services and AI, and where do you see it being in the next 5 years or so?
5 years probably is quite a long period for this era or this technology. As I said, the landscape is moving faster than we think. But even if I say a few years down the line, means I'm still waiting for the launch of Optimus from Tesla. Hopefully, we'll see it next year. That's age, yeah. But in financial services, I would see what I can see in the next few years is probably you would have a personalized AI assistant
Mm,
would
mm.
guide you through, um, depending on the products you're looking for, whether it's
So more
investment
like for your job or for your particular type of
or your risk
customer.
profile, right?
Yeah.
And then depending on what products you're looking for, investment, wealth, loans, whatever that is, they can guide you, recommend you. They know your history, and can recommend you product. But also at the same time, they might actually go and research that product for you.
So almost like a personal financial advisor for everyone.
That's what I think. Yes, that's.
Mm.
I think it's not that far off. Maybe give it 2 to 3 years, we'll start seeing those. It reminds me of a movie actually, Her. I don't know if you've seen the movie
Yeah,
called Her.
yeah.
Yes, yeah, it was ahead of its time. And when I saw that movie, it's quite fascinating, where you had your own personal assistant all the
Yeah,
time, and I think we're not that far off. But again, with financial services, the key again is regulation, data privacy,
mm,
security.
mm.
So we will definitely have to make sure that those things are in place. And even if the financial services doesn't have full blown AI assistant, you will definitely see some kind of AI assistant in the next few years. You probably
Yeah,
would have experienced it today itself, like some of the um, online services, financial services, they do have AI capabilities.
yeah. And yeah, I think what I'm seeing is quite a lot of effort going into making sure you understand that it's generated advice, and that's an aspect of it. Okay. So this is clearly going to keep changing as an area and keep advancing. If you had one piece of advice to give someone investing in this space, what would it be?
Well, I would say it's never too late. Start as soon as possible, because you are touching AI tools without realizing it. So
Mm,
even on a day-to-day basis, even if you think that you're not, you actually are touching AI tools in some shape or form, either in your day-to-day work or at home or in public spaces. So bringing into your organization, you should bring that as soon as possible. Now, when you're bringing that, again, make sure the use cases which you pick are quick wins,
mm.
can bring in efficiency at a very faster pace. So it can move the needle. Don't go for high risk and big use cases, because that will burn your effort within the organization, and
Yeah,
you won't see
yeah,
the value straight away. So if you're starting, pick something which is nice, small, narrow. It is high value, low risk, and start showing the return of investment on that use case. Once
yeah.
you start that, you'll also learn through a lot of the journey as part of building that, and that will help you to start picking up medium to high.
Yeah, and I think with your platform investment, you could probably also include get the foundations right. Once you start nailing a couple of use cases with a solid foundation, you'll be able to expand from there. Yeah.
No, absolutely, yes, yeah, and again, if you pick small, you will be able to build the foundations in a lot more smaller, granular fashion.
Mm, mm.
And if you're picking small, you can validate the use case a lot faster before you build the platform itself, because you have so many tools available. You can just bring one of those tools to just validate the use case. You don't have to use it, but once you validate it, okay, this is valuable. You start building those
Yeah,
trust.
exactly. Then invest. Yeah, that makes
Yeah.
perfect sense. And as a software vendor, obviously I'm excited by that. If they haven't started yet, it's not too late. The technology investment. It's clearly is going to be part of what a future company looks like. So, the advice kind of remains the same. Get your data foundations sorted, get your technology around managing these things sorted, get your teams sorted. This has all been an excellent insight. So thanks, Murtaza. Thanks for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
No, thanks a lot, Aaron, for inviting me. And yeah, pleasure to share the thoughts. And happy to take any questions if you have in future. But yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Data Matters Live. Murtaza from Amplifi Capital shared his experience of Gen.AI, data, and financial services. If you're interested in doing more with your data, why not contact us? We'd love to chat about how we can help. With our data platform and expert support, we think we can get you covered.